In part 1, we saw how important it is that the mouse routines we write run very quickly. I said if they run slowly, the program can become sluggish. I'll demonstrate that now on a running program in real time. In this program, whenever I do something with the mouse, the corresponding mouse routine will draw a mark on the screen. That way we can see all the routines that get called and when.
The labels show you where things are going to line up. Just for convenience, I've left out the word mouse on each of the routines, but the routines are mouse moved, mouse dragged, mouse pressed, and so on. So let's go ahead and run the program, and as it runs, I'm going to do stuff with the mouse. So there's draw. I'm going to move the mouse. I'll click, I'll drag, I'll let go, I'll click, I'll drag, I'll let go. And that is now one successful run of the program. So let's zoom in a little bit and take a look at how things look. So draw is getting called 60 times a second. You can see the little white marker at the top. And each one of these vertical white lines is draw, getting called. You can see it takes very little time. The yellow lines are the mouse being moved. And you can see that it's happening about as frequently as draw is getting called. And that's processing's internal clock. It says, well, each time I call draw, I'll check the mouse. And they're happening at almost the same time. They're not directly under one another, but because these lines are so thin, they look like they're under one another. So here, now I'm going to scroll over. Here we can see where I've pressed. We have that sort of dark red line. That's when the mouse went down. And then soon after that, I started moving the mouse. And so dragged got called. And here's a little gap where I didn't drag the mouse. I pushed it and probably stopped pushing it and so forth. Moved the mouse around some more. It looks like I gave it one last little jiggle, and then here's the purple line that tells me where the mouse was released. And then I kept moving the mouse, and so we have more moved, and here's where I pressed down again. Now we have dragged. So if I zoom back out, we can see everything worked out very nicely because all of these routines are happening very quickly. And tell you, if I zoom back all the way, we can see the whole program. There it is. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seconds worth of program. Now I'm going to change the program just a little bit. And I'm going to say in each of these handling routines, I'm just going to waste some time. I wrote a little loop and it just does nonsense. But it takes, like a fifth of a second to do that nonsense. So now every time I do something with the mouse, it's going to take quite a while. Here we are. There's draw. I'm moving. I'm going to click. I'm going to drag. I'll let go. Wow. So let's take a look and see what happened here. I'm going to zoom in. And I'll tell you what, I'll scroll to the beginning. And we can see at the beginning of the program, here's draw getting called, clickety, clickety, click. And then I started to move the mouse. And each of these big yellow blocks indicates one call to mouse moved. And you can see it's just eating up all the time. And what happens? Draw gets delayed. Look how infrequently draw is getting called. If we were really drawing some interesting graphics here, it would start to stutter. Instead of getting 60 frames per second, between the first and second, I'm getting 2 frames. And between the third and fourth second, I'm getting 2 frames. Okay, well, I stopped moving and then I pressed the mouse. Mouse pressed took a long time. But once I pressed the mouse, I didn't move it for a moment. And you can see that draw started getting called at 60 frames per second again because nothing was stopping it. So once again, great. Now our animation is happening beautifully and smoothly. And then I started to drag. And each drag sucked up so much time that draw got pushed off. Finally, I let go. We got a call to release. And it looks like I moved it one last time before the program quit on me. So here's the timeline of that program, and look at the row of the white lines just beneath the second markers. That's draw. And you can see we only have 2 little bursts of nice animation, and all the rest was happening incredibly slowly, 1 or 2 frames per second. Chunk, chunk, chunk. That's going to look terrible. Now here I'm spending a long time on each one of these function calls. Tell you what, for fun, let's make them even longer. Let's say that they'll be 3 times longer. Let's see what that looks like. So we're running, and now I'm going to start moving the mouse. I'll click and drag, and Oh man, that's it. Look at this. We're getting less than 1 frame per second. In fact, there's a whole second there where there's no frames at all. This thing has slowed down to about 1 frame every 3 seconds. So that's terrible. First we had smooth animation, and then it just became a sluggish beast. So just for fun, let's look at a case where the calls to the mouse routines aren't atrocious, but they're still a little bit longer. Maybe it's your first attempt at writing these things and they're a little bit longer than you want them to be. Let's go ahead and run this. And I'm going to drag, I'll click and drag. And you can see they're taking a little bit longer than I want them to. And if you look at the top row, you can see draw was getting called very, very, very quickly. 60 times a second, and then it slowed down. And the frequency of calling draw would pick up when I stopped doing stuff with the mouse, but then when I started dragging it and clicking it and moving it around, the speed with which draw got called slowed down again. And as I kept monkeying with the mouse, draw kept getting updated. It looks like 10 or 12 frames per second, certainly not the 60 frames per second that I wanted at the beginning. So let's put everything back the way it was when we started and see what it looks like when these routines really are super short and super tight. I'll click the mouse, move it, drag it. Doesn't matter what I do, we're still getting great performance out of draw. We're getting lots of calls to mouse handlers. There's lots of yellow moved, lots of cyan dragged, and even plenty of pressed and released calls. But the frames are still coming out at 60 times a second, really nice and smooth. So this is why you want your mouse handlers to be very short in time. And it's why you want your keyboard handlers to be short as well. You want these things to do their job and get out, and typically they do that by just saving a couple of global variables and setting up a couple of numbers. If they start to take too long, everything gets delayed until your handler is finished. And that's going to make things look sluggish and unresponsive. So now you know what's going on, and you know how to fix things if there's a problem, and you know why there's a problem if there's a problem. So keep your code short and tight, and your graphics will be smooth and your interaction will be wonderful.